Am I just jumping straight?
We'll just have a couple of meeting procedures.
Oh,
in there.
okay.
Yeah.
Hello. Everyone was just looking at me expectantly.
So who are the members, just so I know who's meant to be here?
Everyone's here at the moment except for it's going to be online.
Oh, okay, right. So I start with, this is the order?
Yeah, so we'll do the karakia and then you go, and then, yeah, just go through these things.
Okay. To open the meeting, only a couple of minutes late. Whakataka tihao ki ti uru, whakatahao ki poga, ki mata ki taka, ia mata tara ki tai, I he aka, ti akataura, ti hao, I oka, I hao, te he, Māori ora. Thank you for your help with that, although you said it more quickly than I was hoping. No, you did a great job. Thank you. Welcome everyone to today's Environment and Infrastructure Hearings panel meeting. And I think we have one person who's not in the room, but she is online, which is Tamitha Paul. She will be soon, not quite yet. The reason I'm a bit stilted, you guys at the back, is this is the first time I've been close to the bell, and I'm fixated by my ability to do that rather than talk. So I have to, what do I do?
So you need to move that we accept them.
Okay, do we accept the apology from Councillor Paul for lateness? Thank you. So that's, I think, might be literally our only vote. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, if everyone could vote on that. I'm not too worried. Okay, I presume that the motion was carried.
Yeah.
Has everyone got a conflict of interest? Nope. We have no minutes, and there are no items not on the agenda. It says here there is no public participation, but I thought this was only about public participation. Oh, okay, right, okay, right. Okay, so for you guys at the back, you have between 10 and 5 minutes, depending on whether you represent an organisation or an individual. And it would be a really good idea if you gave us enough time to ask questions, but that's your choice. One thing which I would really like from each of you when you actually give your presentations is if you could explain the group you represent or your reasons for being here. That would be, I think it would be very helpful for us to understand what's motivated you to put the time and effort into making the submissions. And our first person is Benedette Casey, who represents Usefully.
Just trying to flick the, is this working? Where am I aiming this?
Need to share it.
Oh, thank you. Kia ora koutou. Benedette Casey, tako ingoa. I'm one of the co-founders of Usefully, which is a clean tech business in Wellington. We're assisting Aotearoa in the decarbonisation of Aotearoa through the textile sector. We create science-based solutions to the mountains of textile waste. And we have also led the industry co-design of a national scale circular economy for textiles. We provide expert advice to government and to industry. And I'm here to provide some feedback on Wellington City Council's waste strategy through a textile lens, because that is what we know, but part of that will obviously resonate within other sectors. So what I thought I'd do is give you a quick background on from a global perspective on textile policy, and then some of the barriers for Wellington in moving forward, and then some a couple of real world examples and some actions the council could take to really deliver on your objectives. So this is thanks to Scotland's carbon metric. When we look at textiles, it's one of the most impactful resources that we have in the world. There's also a misconception that textile waste is mainly generated by the public through our desire for fashion, and that's really misleading. The government is the single largest procurer of textiles in New Zealand. When you think of all the hospitals, all the sheets, the towels, the uniforms repeated in our prisons, all our frontline staff, our police, our military, customs, and from a regional perspective, your lifeguard uniforms in your swimming pools, your parking meter staff, your parks and recreation. So those volumes within in the commercial sector are just absolutely massive. And information from Wellington City Council, there's 93 tonnes of textiles going to landfill in Wellington every week. So it's quite considerable. The outsized impacts have led textiles to be prioritised in many countries around the world. Every EU state has basically a zero textiles to landfill policy coming in at 2025. So that's only 2 years away. So that means they have to have separate collection of textiles, and those textiles collected cannot go to landfill. So we're a long way behind that. The textiles are not even prioritised in New Zealand. And from not a spokesperson, but someone from the Ministry for the Environment, when we inquired why they aren't on that set of 6 priority products, it wasn't because of robust research, it was the path of least resistance. So we're really missing a trick here. And to this chart from Scotland, from Zero Waste Scotland, they found that that materials such as textiles have high carbon impact relative to weight. For example, their textiles make up just 6% by volume, but account for over 34% of net carbon impacts. So our barriers, our current policy settings lag at least 10 years behind Europe. We're even behind Australia, I'm ashamed to say, who have last year put $1 million into the development of a textile product stewardship scheme. In 2020, the industry, textile and clothing industry, presented a set of recommendations to government, and these 6 actions, it took just under 2 years to get a response from the Ministry for the Environment. So that just shows a lack of sort of ambition in this space. This chart I think you'll find really, really interesting. So here we have Wellington City Council's taken out of your waste strategy. It's textiles by volume. So you can see where textiles sit, number 5 in terms of volume, but you're really missing a key piece of information that will allow you to, will enable you to take action. Alongside it, we've got this graph from West London Waste, and so they've done similar. They've looked at the volumes, but then they've also looked at it, analysed it by impacts, and from there you can see the resources that have the most impact, and therefore where the energy and where the resources should go so you get most for your decarbonisation buck. So I think that's a key piece of information that's missing within the strategy. The other barrier that we're finding quite challenging is carbon certification. And the carbon certification in New Zealand uses a cost model. And so that means that transport and construction are always going to be the primary resources that you focus on. But unfortunately means things like really intensive, resource-intensive and carbon-intensive products like textiles get completely missed, but they're low-hanging fruit in terms of reaching those decarbonisation targets. There's a lack of policy direction from central government, but that does not mean that we can't take action at a regional level. And Auckland Council leading the way last year, they prioritised textiles. I've got a tender out at the moment to map the material flows within Auckland. Another barrier which you'll be highly aware of is our lack of infrastructure. And from a textile perspective, what little infrastructure exists in New Zealand is wool-based, because we're traditionally a wool industry, but that's only a minority fibre. Most of our textiles are polycottons and polyesters and cottons, so they really aren't aligned. So when it comes to the waste strategy, what I'd like to do is just provide a couple of insights into those 4 objectives, and then actions that you can take that would really enhance those. So number 1 was products and services provided in Wellington are waste-free, and the outcome enabling Wellington to move to a circular economy. And back to the recommendations we provided to government, council can really lead the way, ensuring that its own procurement aligns with the circular economy principles. Considerable buying power of government, as you're aware, if harnessed, could boost the end-of-life circular economy, circular supply chains, prevent textiles from becoming waste by budgeting for the responsible management of your own clothing and textile procurement. So that's a key one. The second one was to really draw the line for the community between waste prevention and emissions reduction. This is just a spreadsheet, but we've had, this is a calculator actually. We've had a platform, the Usefully platform, that council-controlled organisations like Wellington Zoo have been for 4 years to understand the impacts of their own textile procurement and to manage those resources better. We've since split it out into this calculator that we're about to build an app with. And what this will allow us to do, the community can use it. They can say they've got 1 T-shirts or 5 skirts, whatever. It will give a carbon and a water figure for that. And the next step, what we'd like to take, is then tie it to the emissions trading scheme. So it will give an emissions price for the things that you can procure. So it moves the community along as well, not only organisations, but it moves industry, not only organisations, but the community. It moves them along so they understand, 1, that waste prevention means an emissions reduction, and then there is a carbon cost to the things that they're procuring. Even if they do nothing about it, they start to understand the financial implications of those emissions. Objective number 2, waste reduction is made attractive and accessible to Wellingtonians. So the last couple of years we've worked with industry creating, designing product stewardship for textiles, and while not prioritised, it's sort of a long way off central government's radar. I think Wellington City Council could work with central government on enabling product stewardship. In designing product stewardship scheme, one of the key lessons that we learned is that nobody really wants to take responsibility for the whole life of that product. And so what we've applied to our platform is we've broken it up into activities, so production, use, and then end of use. And then it enables people to take responsibility over the part of the value chain that they have influence over, and it makes a more equitable system. And the costs are in the cents rather than in the dollars. The other area that we want to focus under this is infrastructure gaps. So how do we pay for that infrastructure gap? And I'm just going to throw this out, and this is for you to consider, and just some thinking we've been doing about it. So if we have the community using an app like this to understand their own emissions and to understand the price of them, some might like to opt in to paying the few cents for, those sheets that they've bought, or those towels, or that new outfit. They might want to opt in. So where does that money go? And the money could either go to an industry good group to be dispersed into research and development or infrastructure, or it could effectively go to council as a kind of carbon tax. I mean, there's a whole lot of legislation and stuff around that.
Bernadette, you've run out of time, so you have to get a wriggle on through the rest if it's
sorry.
okay.
I'll jump right to the end then. And give you some give you some examples of what is already existing in the market. There's a number of organisations like Sustainability Trust, like us, that are already operating in this space. We recently laid a road on the part of the terrace using unwanted textiles. Waka Kotahi have now funded the next development of that and testing. It could repurpose 15% of New Zealand total textile waste. The product value is 20 to 25 million. It would account for 100 jobs and reduction in bitumen and displaced region resources. So there are solutions out there. They're big, they're industrial scale, but we don't have the financial and the policy settings to support them. So we really need to look at those.
That's great.
Thank you.
Right. But are there any
So I'm running through it.
Are there any very quick questions, given that we have run out of time on this one?
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay, thanks. I think we've got Liam Prince from Kaicycle Incorporated. Again, please make sure you introduce the organisation, if that's okay.
Sure. Kia ora koutou katoa, Liam Prince. I'm a compost manager at Kaicycle. We're an urban farm and composting initiative right here in Pōneke. I'm farms based in Wellington. I just really want to emphasise a few key points in our written submission, but I want to leave plenty of time for questions. And also Kate Walmsley, I think, is hopefully joining us online to help answer questions too. Kate is the Kaicycle Composting General Manager. There she is. So just firstly, we are really supportive of the ambition and the general direction of this strategy. As many have acknowledged before, it's just really exciting to see how far we've come in the last few years from looking at this kind of monstrous landfill extension to now a real clear commitment to a zero waste city. So just awesome, ka motuihi, keep up with that. We also very much support that organic waste diversion as a key part of this strategy and really encourage that it makes the connection between getting organics out of landfill and things like soil health, carbon sequestration, climate resilience, and food production as well. Those are all really important things. Our written submission highlights a few concerns we have with the language and the framing, particularly around the way we get organics out of landfill, some missed opportunities there. So, for example, under Objective 1, we support reuse, particularly for packaging, because we do not support most compostable products in packaging, and we can answer questions about that later. We're also disappointed to see that the strategy barely mentions what is already happening in the organic space here in Pōneke, and, in fact, a wide variety of zero waste initiatives. Waste Free Welly and others, we'll talk about that later, whose submissions we fully support. But without this recognition of what's already happening, it doesn't really feel like the strategy represents Wellington as well as it could, but also doesn't grasp the opportunities to make really rapid progress on our zero waste goals. So, for example, parts of Objective 2 that relate to organics could build on the strengths and the growth of Kaicycle's model, as well as working with other initiatives, including Council Zone, like Capital Compost and the Community Composting Hubs trial, to really start building the organics diversion, a citywide system for organics diversion now rather than a few years from now. And this relates to our concern around some of the language and the framing. Page 67 of the strategy talks about investing in an organics processing facility in the singular. Now, this would have to be a very large-scale facility, but it doesn't consider the potential and the benefits of having a distributed network of multiple facilities, and that would be consistent with other parts of the strategy, particularly around resource recovery, and it would also align really well to the proximity principle, which is in the strategy, which we really support. So we suggest just changing the language on page 67 to discuss organics processing facilities or plants in the plural rather than the singular. And from this perspective, we can see that including council have actually already started building this organics diversion infrastructure, for example, by funding Kaicycle to set up our new composting facility in the Rongotai, which would more than double our current capacity, and that's just one example. Similarly, we've suggested a rewording of one of the priority actions related to organics under Objective 3. And in particular, we want to remove the terms biofertilizers and renewable energy, because although these are good things, they only really are relevant to one particular technology, which is anaerobic digestion. And we don't think the strategy should bias the outcomes towards one particular technology or another, but it should have a wide scope of the possible technologies and products and outcomes that we might want. The rewording also recognises, again, the need to build on what's already happening in Wellington, and also that whatever system we end up with, it should help to replenish soils and support food production in alignment with Council's newly adopted Food Future Action Plan. So that's really just the key points I wanted to highlight. And just to reiterate, these are really just to strengthen what is already a really awesome and really exciting document. So yeah, Kate and I are happy to take questions.
Kia ora, Liam, thank you. Have you seen examples, obviously Wellington is not leading in a compost collection system. Are other councils working with different ways to collect that compost and work at other, are you seeing examples of how you've got a big collection system with localised systems working well?
In New Zealand?
Or anywhere.
In New Zealand, I mean, New Zealand in many ways in waste infrastructure is behind a lot of the rest of the world, so we don't have a lot of kind of good examples to go by, although I guess there's a few sort of small pilot examples. Say in Nelson, the council have contracted a smaller provider to trial, a few different systems with a couple of different localised processing facilities, including a in-vessel composting machine that this organisation, Community Compost Nelson, have built themselves. But I think internationally there are some really, really exciting models that we could look to. There's a city in France, Besançon, which has a really, really interesting model, which is actually completely supported and funded by the publicly owned waste management company, where there's hundreds of small and medium scale composting facilities across the city. They're at the foot of apartment buildings. They're in areas that can service over 1,000 households and things like that. And that works in with all the other kinds of collection infrastructure that the city provides. Also, Austria has all sorts of really interesting systems of, from household to neighbourhood scale, right up to sort of nearby farms end up receiving some of the material that's collected, and that goes back into food production to supply the city again. And then also they have also some large facilities, so they have quite a sophisticated network of different scales. Yeah.
Iona.
Thank you, that was a great submission. I'm still sort of struggling with this idea about having a centralised organics collection versus a distributed model. Council sort of going down the centralised model. Can you just talk a little bit about how that would work? Because obviously it would be good if we could get something that's the lowest cost as well as being effective.
Yes, sure. I think it's important to separate to a degree the collection system from the processing system. They can be thought about differently, and they, what a collection system, could work with any number of processing kind of arrangements. But I think that it's important to recognise that a collection system is often one of the most expensive elements of an organics diversion infrastructure. So having a distributed network would actually help to reduce the costs of collection, because a lot of stuff is not travelling. It's staying within a very local area. It might even be, so there can be drop-off facilities, which we're trialling, and Kate could talk more to our drop-off trials. So rather than us having to go and collect it, people just bring it to a site which is very near to the composting facility. So reduces costs, reduces the need for vehicles and extra bins and stuff like that. So that's just a quick sort of summary of.
Sarah, did you have a question?
Yeah, just my question was, I'm picking up on your point that there wasn't perhaps enough detail about what's actually happening in this space. And my question really is about, do you think that there's sufficient information there about what's actually happening in the private, with people's personal collection, like how many people are actually composting or using a worm farm in Wellington? Is there enough information that we've actually got to know the state of play right now?
I don't think so, apart from some of the data that came out of the trial in Miramar. That's sort of a snapshot, but in terms of a citywide thing, I think there's real scope. I think others will talk to it about just mapping what is happening at different levels around Wellington, not just for organics, but other things too.
Thank you for that.
I've got a question actually, which is, do you know why people are reluctant to actually do home composting?
I don't know, does Kate want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Liam. I think there's quite a few things. There's a lot of people out there with the kind of the goodwill who would like to do home composting, but space might be a restriction, especially as we look to kind of seeing more densification of housing in the coming years. It actually takes a bit of time and resources and effort to do home composting well. It's very different to just throwing your food scraps by themselves into a bin and leaving it. And a lot of people with just busy lives, looking after families, etc., just do not have the time to do these things, even if they have the goodwill. It's just another barrier. There's barriers to entry.
Thank you. Any other questions? One last question.
Yes, I think your point about how that we're into a new area, especially as far as New Zealand's concerned, is well made. My question is, do you think that the strategy should maybe recognise that we still need to do some piloting, try some different methods, perhaps to try and see, rather than sort of lock in, say, a centralised collection process? What are your comments on that?
Yeah, would fully support that. I think there's real opportunity to, and I mean, I guess I could relate it to the way council's approaching cycleways and kind of that temporary trialling, but very action-based pilots. So I think that there's totally scope for doing that in the space as well. Very much so. Yeah. Kate wants to add to that.
That's great. We've run out of time actually, so that's perfect. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Now we have Hannah Blumhardt of The Rubbish Tip.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou, ko Hannah Tokuingoa. I'm representing The Rubbish Trip, which is an organisation I run with my partner Liam, who you've just heard from. So The Rubbish Trip is an organisation that is dedicated to zero waste advocacy, zero waste research and consulting, and zero waste public engagement. And our expertise in zero waste has been developed both through our lived experience, so we've been so far over 8 years living without a rubbish bin, and also through our applied work. So we spent 3 years travelling the country full-time, doing hundreds of presentations to communities across New Zealand, all about how individuals can reduce their household waste. We have worked with many organisations and businesses to support them to realise their zero waste goals at a systemic level, and we do extensive research and consulting with a variety of organisations in the waste and resource recovery sector on zero waste issues. Our focus is really on the top of the waste hierarchy, looking at how we can redesign production and consumption systems and business models to reduce waste at source, and also source reduction systems like reuse and high quality cycling of organic materials, particularly through composting. Today I'm going to really take the Rubbish Trip submission as read, but I want to highlight 3 key points before we go to questions. The first is to talk about the chosen title of the strategy, the Zero Waste title, then to talk about strengthening some of those language commitments and actions around the objectives focused on the top of the waste hierarchy, and then finally looking at how the strategy could better showcase all of the initiatives that are already happening in Wellington to build zero waste and circularity. So to start with the title, we are just over the moon and so excited to see the proposal that this be titled a zero waste strategy. Zero waste is not just any old term. Zero waste is a concept that builds on and brings with it a huge body of practical and conceptual knowledge that has been nurtured and developed by over decades by civil society organisations, community groups and local governments across the world and in New Zealand. So to see the Zero Waste title is really exciting for us because we take it as a signal that Council is intending to re-engage with this community of expertise, and we are so ready to be there to support the Council to ensure that the implementation of this strategy lives up to its name. And we're really hopeful that Council will find a way to enable us to provide this support but have our expertise valued for what it is. And I'm not just talking about the rubbish strip here, I'm talking about all of the organisations in Wellington, many of whom are represented through the Waste Free Welly group. On the Zero Waste title, there is a responsibility when we're using this term. There are a lot of terms throughout the strategy document that are used, such as sharing economy, reuse economy, circular economy, reuse, repurpose, regenerative, all of these terms that have very well understood definitions within zero waste theory. But in the strategy, they are often used not quite correctly, inconsistently, or interchangeably when they're not interchangeable. And we would really like to see this cleared up. Might sound pedantic, but actually it's not. These words have meanings, and when they're used sort of not how we understand them, it becomes a little bit confusing as to what the Council's saying, and that's probably not great in a strategy document. So we really support the Waste Free Welly suggestion that Council goes back and creates a research-based glossary of key terms and then goes back and aligns all of those terms in the strategy with that glossary so that we're all on the same page. And we are happy to support with that if necessary. Our second high-level point is around the objectives. We're so excited to see that these objectives are really spaced across the waste hierarchy, so we're not just looking at recycling and disposal, yay. Particularly Objective 1 and 2 are really exciting in terms of looking at designing out waste at that production business model end and also looking at reuse, repair and so on. Particularly with Objective 1, though, the narrative that follows this objective is almost like it's been written for another objective that's further down the waste hierarchy. It's not quite living up to that high-level goal. We would really like to see this narrative for Objective 1 redrafted. And in part, this is because we don't really believe that the Council has intentionally sort of watered down the narrative. We get a sense that it's more just a lack of clarity or comfort with determining how Council is actually going to support business models to transition and to build reuse. So we have lots of suggestions in our submission. One of them is we just really like to see Council actively walk the talk in terms of the way that it operates just on a day-to-day basis in terms of that top of the waste hierarchy goal and procurement of services. And we also think there's a possibility to have a few more creative targets that are focused on that top of the waste hierarchy that I'm also happy to talk about in questions. And finally, the last matter that we wanted to highlight is just that the strategy does a great job of talking about all of the gaps in our Wellington economy at the moment in terms of achieving zero waste and circular economy outcomes. But we feel a lot like there's a lot of initiatives and circular zero waste initiatives that are already happening in Wellington that have been overlooked in the strategy. We accept that a lot of these initiatives are quite niche. However, providing them as examples in the strategy is really powerful because it enables people who read the strategy who don't spend their entire life thinking about waste to actually understand, like, what would it look like if Wellington was zero waste? What are the kinds of businesses and practices we would see more of? Also, by showcasing some of these organisations and businesses, it's a really important morale boost for these organisations. In the post-COVID environment, a lot of these organisations, small businesses, charitable, really struggling, just like everybody else is. But then on top of that, they're trying to do things that are really innovative that don't really fit very well within our current linear systems. They've got multiple barriers, and just to be recognised that, yep, you're on the right track, you're doing a good thing, it's aligning with our strategy, would be really, really valuable. So, yep, those are three overarching points, but overall, we're really pleased to see that the zero waste strategy, and we thank the Council for putting this forward.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just when you were mentioning on point 2 your creative targets, did you have any examples of what you might mean, or what you're pointing to there?
Yeah, sure. And we did list some of them in the submission, so if I don't rattle them all off well, then you can go back and find them. But essentially thinking about what are the business models we would see more of in a zero waste Wellington, and then how can we set targets around that? So, for example, by X date, we would have X grocery refilleries in different suburbs. By X date, we would have X number of living compost hubs dotted around the city. By X date, we will have X number of sharing libraries and repair cafes. And these are targets that other municipalities have been setting, so it's not sort of like things we just made up out of the ether. So yeah, then that way you don't, because all the other targets are very set around reducing material flows. And so it requires a little bit of a baseline understanding around the actual material and product flows, and that can be a real barrier for setting business model targets. And so focusing more on the business as opposed to reduce this amount of material or avoid this percentage of packaging through reuse systems is much more comfortable.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. It's very inspiring to know you've lived without a rubbish bin for quite a while. And my question is, because I'm trying to reduce my waste too, but what's the hardest and most challenging thing about that? Is there a particular product that's difficult, or yeah?
Everybody's different because everybody's life is different. For Liam and I personally, the hardest thing has actually been social occasions, where, sometimes it's really difficult to enjoy social occasions where, say, you're sharing food or whatever, and it's just generating all this waste. So sometimes we just don't go to things because we just got not. And one really big thing actually has been events. I've found it really hard to re-engage with a lot of events in the city because there's just so much waste, and that's actually an area where it would be great to see more proactive council moves towards just requiring single-use free events, requiring reuse systems, working with the businesses that exist already. So, yeah, that might not have been what you expected as an answer.
No, that's fine.
Actually, it's the weight of the waste everywhere. That's
no, I just wanted to know what the biggest challenge was, so it's open to anything. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's always great to see people so passionate. So my question is about what you see the role of the council. I can certainly understand the role with respect to providing the service, but you want to extend it towards prevention, and you mentioned things like perhaps bylaws or requirements to do certain things. How important is that side of the council's role in terms of meeting the sort of targets of zero waste?
Look, I think it's critically important, especially because so much of the strategy is around how we want people to change their behaviour. So if council can't model it, it sort of shows by a lack of commitment, but also that it's not possible. So we'd like to see council just do really basic things like all council venues, single-use free, no bottled water in council venues. All events that are operating on council land need to have a plan to transition to reusables by X time. Procuring from local supply, like milk in the fridges, should all be local suppliers and reusable glass bottles. Like, it might sound ridiculous, but these are things that the university is doing. So the council is already not keeping up with the most progressive institutions in Wellington. And so when you're talking about leadership, it's pretty important. So yeah, I think it's important, and focusing less on the tonnage diverted. I think that goes back to this creative targets and thinking more about supporting those business models, because council's a big procurer as well. And so when council moves to support reuse systems at council events, it becomes economically viable for the businesses that are trying to offer those services to actually offer them, and just start to see
Sorry, I've just got time for one more question. So
yeah.
Thank you. So ideally, I think if council is going to be giving specific shout outs to individual existing waste initiatives, we'd probably want to see some evidence demonstrated of scalability. Are there any individual initiatives that you can think of that would meet that criteria?
Well, firstly, I'd say the strategy is already giving some shout outs. Yeah, so there's that. But secondly, I think that scalability is not necessarily the key consideration when you're thinking about transitioning business models. You actually really want to have an example of viability of an alternative system. So, just things like car sharing schemes like Mevo, great to talk about. Council has a relationship there with the parking spaces, talk about it. Or, just talk. And I think that there's some good jobs being done in terms of the second-hand economy, just shouting out to that. But yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of scalable models to talk about. Feel uncomfortable reeling them all off here, but like even talking about all the zero waste refilleries. Like Wellington has one of the highest concentration of food and beverage producers who use reusable packaging systems and grocery refilleries of any region. So let's talk about it a little bit more. We have events providers who are operating reuse systems. Round the Bays was 100% reusable. And even the council doesn't do a good job of talking about its own initiatives. The Go By Bike Day was single-use cup-free, and there was a local provider who was procured. I would have expected to see that all over social media. Here's a thing council's doing. So yeah, just think about, it doesn't always have to be a massive impact outcome to talk about good stories. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. That's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have Karen Thomas, who is not representing an organisation, but is representing herself. Thank you, Karen.
Well, I'm Karen Thomas, and as you said, I'm representing myself as a consumer, and it's the frustration and confusion that I find trying to do the right thing of recycling products. I'm going to start with ballpoint pens. Okay, maybe I should go digital, but I really like writing. So just a moment, I'll get out my PowerPoint presentation, which is in an envelope. I'm going to read much of it because I'm a bit nervous. Okay. Right. Ballpoint pens are a throwaway item. You get a collection of them from, am I doing it wrong? Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, thank you. You know how you get a collection of them from people at different places. They give you pens, and this is just a small number of the pens that I've collected. I've tried to find refills for them, and I've pulled them apart, looked at them, grouped them by sort. Yeah, I'm a nerd, but I don't care. I'm trying to do something in my own way. Anyway, I went to Whitcoulls, and I really am nervous. Now it's fallen out. Yeah. So you can buy a blister pack with 2 refills in, but it's this sort of refill, and it doesn't fit most of the pens that are there. A lot of those ones that are giveaways, they have a standard plain white tube, but there are no refills that match that to be able to put it in, because a lot of them are really nice to hold and write and whatever. So that's Whitcoulls. That costs $4.99 for 2 refills. Okay. Now my lovely old Bic 4 colour pen, some of you will remember these from going back. I decided to use it again. You can get refills for them. They write smoothly. Those Whitcoulls ones don't. If you're on a glossy bit of paper, it just doesn't flow and do all the ink, so it's not quite as good. Anyway, I went to get refills for this. They're $3.62 per individual refill, so it comes in one packet, at least it's paper. So if I wanted 4 refills for this pen, it's going to cost me $14.48. To buy a new pen, it's going to cost me $6 something. And Warehouse have just had a special for 3 of these pens for $11.89. And Bic also has a pen called the Bic Click Stick Eco Solutions Retractable Ballpoint Pen, promising good even flow writing. And its eco solution is that it is made from 62% recycled materials. That's good, it's a start, but it doesn't say you can get a refill for it, and it only costs 99 cents. So why can't I buy 4 refills for my pen at even paying 99 cents each? Yeah, so my thing is that it's the manufacturers in the beginning that are causing heaps of problems. And as the consumer at the end of the chain, I'm having to dispose of rubbish that I didn't want in the first place. And one of my I don't know how you do this because it's obviously not under the council's, you know, you can't control what manufacturers do, but I don't understand why manufacturers aren't getting more on board with this. If I could go to a stationer and they received a little cardboard carton full of just the plain refills, you could go and buy 99 cents or whatever they're going to be, and then I could just buy that, no packaging, no extra stuff, and bung it in my pens, and I can keep using them. So that was one thing. So to me, the change needs to come from the manufacturers in the first place. I've spent numerous hours on the computer and the internet, and phoning and emailing companies of products that I do buy, because I do try to go for refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle, but a lot of the things, I don't know that I'd actually want some of the things they recycle into. I don't know that I'd want plastic fence posts. So I've contacted places like Chelsea Sugar and Fonterra. So I'm going to give an example.
Sorry, you have to get a wriggle on, so can you give us a very quick example because you've run out of time?
Have I really already?
Yes,
Goodness.
you have, but...
Construction waste. Really have been construction waste and the demolition. Naylor Love has a video about their wonderful sorting of materials. I talked to somebody who worked on their site, said never saw anything of the sort. And the gym in Bell Road, Brooklyn, that got demolished. A resident asked if he could deconstruct and take out the hardwood flooring. They kept putting them off, and next thing, it was demolished and gone.
So, sorry, anyone got any questions?
Yeah, all right.
No, but remember that we do have a morning tea break at 10:30, so you could always join us for a cup of coffee, and you can tell us then.
Oh, sorry, thanks.
That's fine. Thanks, Karen. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I thought I'd bring it down to the individual. I mean, I've got heaps anyway.
Yep. No. Right. Thank you. And we've got next Bridget Sistig from Repair Cafe Aotearoa. Is she here?
Yep.
Oh, she's online.
Kia ora.
She is. G'day.
Yeah. Good morning, and thank you so very much for the invitation to be able to share with you some of our thoughts about your excellent proposal to make Wellington Zero waste free. So first, maybe a little bit about us. So Repair Cafe Aotearoa, New Zealand, is a national organisation that started about 2 years ago. And we have a group of about 50 repair cafes all across the country that are operating on a pop-up event basis, where locals come together and people who've got repair skills, they offer them for free to people who bring in their broken household items. So this is an international concept and is probably present in over 200 countries now, and also in Aotearoa. And so it's a proven community-based concept, which also invites and collaborates with businesses and councils and many other collaborators. So maybe if I could please have my slide shown, that would be amazing. Lovely. Okay, here you can see when we started, this was, of course, during COVID. So we had time to build relationships, which are the foundation of our organization. And so currently we are umbrellaed by the Zero Waste Network. And however, we are in the process of becoming our own legal entity. We are closely connected with the environment hubs. And we do have a agreement with Parakore, and where we are asked to introduce repair cafes into marae and Maori organizations. We're also working closely together with sharing facilities like tool libraries or maker spaces on time banks as well. Important to us is like to have repair further represented in the education sector, community sector, and businesses as well. So we are currently running a few case studies. Personally, I'm based in Tamaki Makaurau, where we have the Resource Recovery Network park, where we are introducing repair cafes and repair stations into community recycling centres. And this is something that I saw in your proposal as well, that there might be opportunity to, include repair in community recycling centres, which is very exciting for us to learn about. We are also actively involved in the right to repair legislation because repair and product design are closely interlinked, as you know. So, the idea is, and I find this resonates very well with your strategy as well, is like we are looking at product design. This can also be done by retailers, like challenging product designers to package their products differently, and also offer manuals and repair tools and so forth. So I am very open to questions that you may have, and support the strategy in general.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Iona.
Thank you very much for the work that you do. What's the biggest thing that councils around the country can do to support you to grow?
We currently have a working relationship with the waste solution team at Auckland Council. And so we are running, as I mentioned, case studies at community recycling centres. And also we are currently developing a manual, in fact, that is specifically to Aotearoa, how to set up a repair cafe. We are also starting to collaborate with businesses and social enterprises and so forth to really kind of foster the culture of repair. And I think that council can support with grants. Also at festivals, repair can be included. You can have a repair station. There are many different opportunities that are possibilities.
Laurie.
Kia ora, Karen, thank you. Just two questions. Is there a trend in the types of products that are being repaired, and therefore a trend in the skills base that is needed to repair?
Great question. Thank you very much. Yes, what we generally find at repair cafes that people bring in bicycles, electrical items like toasters and kettles, mixer and so forth. So just basic household items, kitchen items, and also mending, of course. So I guess, these are products that may not be built to last, and they break down quite quickly. So there is definitely a trend. It's also an international trend. And maybe I should also mention at this point that we are collecting data about the items that are presented. What is repairable? What part might be missing? What has reached the end of its life, and can it be recycled? And we are joining an international repair data collection system.
Can I ask a question which is actually just repeating Laurie's, because you didn't quite answer it, but how do you actually arrange for the skills to do the repairs?
As I mentioned, we are working with skilled repairers from the community, but also with business people who have got a repair businesses, and they may want to connect with the community. We also allow them to promote their business, and if there's a bigger job that can't be finished or completed at a repair cafe, that can then be taken to a business if the person wishes to do that.
Thanks. Any other questions? No? Thank you. Thanks very much for that.
Yes. So we support.
Sorry. Yeah, you've got
you've got Zero Together, Absolutely Positively Wellington. You know, these are sort of like places where repair cafes could join you as well. But I guess, you know, what my point is that it would be good to see repair represented in businesses, and that we make this a stronger alliance. And I think that council has a strong role to play in this. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you. And our next person is Polly Griffith of Waste Free Welly.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Polly Griffiths. I'm Sustainability Manager at Sustainability Trust, but I am here today on behalf of Waste Free Welly, and we're an open and collaborative group working to progress zero waste in the city. We really welcome this strategy and acknowledge the mahi from all involved that has seen a significant shift in ambition in terms of what can be achieved in the city. We fully support the Council's commitment to zero waste future for Wellington and, of course, the rejection of incineration. We really just want to get on with it now, make tangible progress with a lot of urgency. So our ask of you today as we move forward to implementation is to value, amplify, support and engage with purpose-driven business doing the mahi. So you'll hear me kind of reflect some of what you've already heard about this morning. Maori community, social enterprise and SME, service delivery which focuses on impact and user experience. There's a lot already happening in the city, some supported by council. KaiCycle, Hopper Refill, Non-Stop Solutions, Mevo, Switched On Bikes are just a few. We want to work alongside council as delivery partners. The strategy does create a better framework for enabling these kind of partnerships. Our why is that we are making zero waste vision of the strategy really tangible and visible for residents and businesses. We embed services into communities and deliver co-benefits across waste reduction, community development, economic development, environmental protection and climate change. Sustainability Trust's repair programme and other repair cafes in the city normalise the circular economy through creating a community of repairers. We innovate, pilot and trial new concepts. Non-Stop Solutions avoided the creation of over 60,000 single-use items across Round the Bays, Newtown Festival and Island Bay Festival alone through their reuse systems. We can implement quickly while large infrastructure comes on board. KaiCycle is servicing MUDs and city centre businesses who can't access a food waste collection, and they divert their food waste through composting hubs. We reach communities that have been overlooked or who can't be serviced using standard services. Sustainability Trust Eco Centre, we work with over 20 partner waste contractors, charities and social enterprises to divert resource streams to reuse and recycling. I've only got the time to highlight a couple of examples, but creating diversity in service delivery and locations increases resilience in the case of emergency and across time. So how can council support our mahi knowing that you don't have endless piles of cash? Much of our work wasn't recognised in the strategy, and you've heard that already. And at a 4-hour community engagement workshop for the Regional Waste Minimisation and Management Plan this week, I found myself again having to repeat to another set of consultants the same stuff about the work that we do. So value our time and knowledge. Work with us to complete a mapping project to identify current activity and enterprises working in the zero waste and circular economy space. Nelson, Tauranga and Tasman District Councils have already paid for this work to be completed. Move to new models for procurement from one-off grants to service delivery contracts to allow us to focus on delivery. Enforce compliance with the waste bylaw to create willingness to pay for services and an expectation of change from business as usual. And we're already seeing this starting to drive positive change through the implementation of the waste bylaw in the event space. Let's work together on joint marketing and comms to showcase the current action being taken. Create a network approach to zero waste hubs for Tip Shop and other sites we're already running, and others to come online can work collectively for mutual benefit. Expand small and medium-sized composting, building on the work of KaiCycle. Expand the range of community engagement and behaviour change programs, but not starting from scratch. Link with national programs, but deliver at the local level using local organisations. advocate with us to central government to create the policy settings that we need to support all of our work. Let's work together to bring the rest of the city with us, showcase amazing success stories, create interim targets to make sure we're tracking against the long-term ambitious targets so that this landfill extension is the last, and keep the community up to date with progress being made. We need everyone with us to make this strategy a reality. And I also just want to finish by inviting you all, if you haven't visited us before, to come and visit 2 Zero Waste Hubs, so the Sustainability Trust Eco Centre in Te Aro and the Kai-Cycle and Non-Stop Solutions site in Rongotai. We can showcase to you some of what we really want to scale, and we'll be very happy to show you all around as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Iona.
So I'll just ask you the same question I asked Liam about small scale versus centralised systems. You were saying that those smaller scale systems could be used while we work on the bigger scale ones, but do you really think we should because they're going to be expensive?
I think it speaks to that additional benefits that these small scale sites have, that we can actually connect with our community and talk about why we're doing this and why food waste diversion is important and is climate action. We've got a composting hub, one of Kai-Cycle's composting hub at the Trust, so we get to have those face-to-face conversations with people. They also enable you to service properties which you can't necessarily with a standard curbside collection. Become a more dense city. This densification is going to happen, and you can't provide a curbside service to multi-occupancy properties.
Thanks.
Thank you. Tony?
Yes. One of the things about your submission is you talk about the need to include waste prevention and reduction in the strategy. And you also talk about the need to adopt bylaws and have targets for the future so that businesses need to meet these targets. What do you say to businesses who come back and say, well, we can't afford to do that? We're struggling as it is. Mm-hmm. And here are some more laws, some more regulations to say you must do this additional thing and it's going to cost more time or more money.
Yeah, listen, we are Sustainability Trust. We're a business. We're a social enterprise, but we're a business as well. We're diverting over 70% of our waste from landfill using the current infrastructure in place in the city, which we know is also inadequate. We're probably saving money through implementing those systems by reducing the cost of our landfilling, and landfilling is only going to get more expensive. So this can actually be a positive thing for business. They can show corporate social responsibility, they can shout to their customers about how they're taking climate action, and they can be more efficient as a business as well through implementing these systems.
Thank you. Now we have a 10-minute break for a cup of coffee. I hope everyone who's in the back of the room can join us for a cup of coffee as well. But just 10 minutes, if that's okay. Martin Payne from Friends of Ofero Stream. Martin, are you here? You are? Jolly good, thank you. And I'd just like to say also, in terms of the previous people, that I use a fountain pen, so I'm not one of those people who has a disposable, so. However, it was quite expensive, so. Okay, Martin, thank you.
Okay, I've got a presentation which hopefully will be on the screen any moment. No? Oh, whoops, go back. Okay. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Martin Payne and I'm representing Friends of Ofero Stream. I'm here to support this zero waste strategy. This strategy is a significant, sorry about that, stride forward in the way that we value the Earth's precious and finite resources and care for the people and the environment. This plan needs to make space for zero waste action to develop and evolve. So we must be careful that we don't lock down action for things that will change that maybe aren't anticipated at this moment. But I would like to talk about the why, because there's been a lot of talk about, I think, some of the more detailed things, which has been very well covered by previous submitters. But I would like to talk about the why. Why is this strategy important to Wellington, and more specifically to our work restoring the health of our urban streams? In our work in and around the Ofero Stream, we are constantly confronted by the effects of waste. The list is long, and I won't go into that, but I just thought I'd bring an example to you of the effect of a landfill. Now, this is, I don't know if you can see, in picture A, we have snails. These live upstream of the tributary that runs out of the TNT landfill. The snails that live, as shown in picture B, live downstream of the polluted discharges from this landfill. And I would say you would barely know that they were snails. They're deformed, discoloured, and I can't imagine living a very happy life at all. And these snails are an example, one of many, of our canary in the coal mine. They're indicators that things are not all well. So in terms of our practice working on the Ofero Stream, when we find a problem, we tend to look upstream. Where is the source? Where are the, and what are the solutions to the issues being created? So here's a picture of our catchment. The red is 3 very large landfills, and in the centre is the City Council landfill. So the difficulty with waste is that we go from this picture of the regenerating ecosystems in the catchment. We add our rubbish and we end up with a wasteland. And basically the landfill has erased ecosystems, and then the landfills themselves have continued to leach waste into the stream in the long term. So when we kind of look at this, we actually think, where are the solutions to this? And we're looking upstream. And when we look upstream, first of all, we see the landfill. And then we see that connected to the City Council waste operations. But we need to go further than that, because the issues actually lie in the community, beyond the landfill, because the landfill is the final receiving point for those, for what we value so poorly as waste. So when we are looking at solutions. We're looking for a transition from the past to the future, from wasteful and careless to careful and waste less. And while we think that the council has some really important responsibilities in providing services, I think more importantly, there's an opportunity here for the council to facilitate conversations, engagement, and community actions with local communities, fostering them at a neighbourhood scale, and also businesses that I think will come to realise that there are actually some really significant opportunities in this circular economy. So we have just a few recommendations for this. The first being using this idea of looking upstream. Now we need to look up the waste hierarchy and be looking for solutions high up in that hierarchy, rather than really focusing all our activity at the last gasp before we landfill the material. We've got to divert those flows. So I would like to suggest that, we've got to, it's a transition in our thinking about how we rethink, and we're talking about it as a waste hierarchy. I actually think there's something about our resource use and circularity of our economy somehow needs to become our conversation. The second thing is listen to the community. We have a lot to learn from mana whenua in this area that will change the direction of our journey together towards zero waste. This strategy needs to belong to the community. So listening carefully to what the community is saying, I think, is a really important part of creating an adaptive and a plan that will evolve into the future. I think this idea of ownership by the community is a strong one that will transform our economy. Lead by example and recognise other leaders in this area. Council has the opportunity to demonstrate best practice to the community in its own workings. But it also needs to recognise existing community and business activities that are working now. Surely they can be extended, scaled, new ideas will be injected into this space, and we need to be able to adapt to that. But I think the idea of significant collaboration with the wider community is really important here. Be brave and act quickly. I think one of the things that we would like to see in this strategy is more assertive language. In places you are saying things like, we aim to treat waste infrastructure today as a finite resource and carefully manage it. I would like to say we will, because if we use words that kind of are not a clear intention of what our hearts feel, I think we will meander around and we won't go quickly. And I think this is one of the key points, is that we have declared a crisis in this space. We need to act quickly. The next one is tell the stories and frequently. Educating is one thing, but stories of our families, neighbourhood, communities, local businesses and council efforts in the journey to zero waste will engage us in something much more powerful. I think storytelling is a way that we can communicate in the way that we are not being told, you should be doing this, but we actually move into a space where we can see people around us doing it, and we want to be part of it. We also need really almost real-time feedback to how we're going. We can't afford to wait 6 years before we get the report. If you could imagine driving a car and looking at the speedometer and it says, oh, no, we're going to give you the report at the end of the day on what your speed was, that would not be effective. Yeah. Okay. And the last one is recognise that we're in this together and leave no one behind. Okay. Thank you.
Kia ora, councillors and Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Ōwhiro Bay Residents Association, OBRA. Our submission on the zero waste strategy covered all objectives in the plan, and I won't go over them. OBRA's thoughts on zero waste align closely with the other speakers, and we support the Council's strategy on zero waste. It's a concept we need to embrace, and until we do, we can never say that Wellington is a leader in anything environmental or climate related. Specifically for OBRA's submission, I'd like to remind you about one of the reasons we should be minimising our waste. Like Martin, we're concerned with landfills covered by Objective 4 of the strategy. The three landfills in Ōwhiro Bay are the Southern Landfill, TNT and C&D, the two private ones. As our population grows, we can't just sweep waste into landfills. It's filling up and destroying the environment. In a circular economy, a landfill is really outside the loop and should be a last resort to actually throw things away. As residents of Ōwhiro Bay, we are concerned that the Southern Landfill and the other two private landfills should take the minimum possible waste and are effectively phased out. This means we're heavily invested in seeing that Wellington's waste is rapidly reduced, tending towards zero. Landfills leak emissions, they leak chemicals and toxins. The new landfills are lined and old ones capped, but who knows whether after 100 years or an earthquake that might break down. Landfills pollute the air with smells, and we get that, whichever direction the wind is going in determines which of us in Ōwhiro Bay smells it. And hopefully that will stop in 2026 after the sewage stops being buried, but we don't know for sure. Landfills pollute the surroundings with flying soft plastics that for decades have been getting into the streams and festooning the regenerating bush. It attracts predators. Rodents and mustelids are attracted and breed there. Birds radiating out from Zealandia and native invertebrates, and even the introduced kiwis further down the line are under threat. Landfills attract traffic, cars and huge numbers of trucks thundering not through Ōwhiro Bay but through Te Aro and Brooklyn, with little enforcement of covering loads or checking they come out of whether they come from out of town or ensuring they're not taking toxic stuff to the C&D landfill. So landfills are an eyesore and an anachronism, and these three landfills, which started life outside the city, are now well and truly inside its boundaries, surrounded by houses, the Marine Reserve and Zealandia. So residents in different parts of Ōwhiro Bay have to put up with all of this. It affects all Wellingtonians and tourists visiting the Marine Reserve and Red Rocks, but most of all it affects us. So some of the things we expect to see, as stated under Objective 1 and 3, on the day in mid-2026 when the sewage sludge is no longer piped to the landfill, Wellington will no longer need the 4 parts of waste to mix with this sewage to bury it. So currently Wellington is the only city in New Zealand burying its sewage, and it's more or less, it's the only major city burying food scraps still. I mean, Christchurch and Auckland are well ahead of us on that. We want to see on day one, when the sewage sludge is turned off, we want to see these measures to reduce waste implemented, not planned or talked about. There will no longer be any excuse. For instance, another 3 years is surely enough time to have got a plan and schedule for curbside food scrap collection and other diversions. So no more food should be accepted in the landfill on that day one in mid-2026. Another thing we want to see is a city emergency plan for the city for waste, and also specifically for the city's landfills. If an earthquake occurs, for instance, there should be a detailed plan for where the debris is sorted and or buried. Currently, there is none except a sort of one-page, high-level thing from Greater Wellington for the region. And the danger is that the southern landfill will get rapidly filled up with rubble, and this contingency should be part of the planning. Point 3, Greater Wellington and the city need to control and monitor the private landfills. Currently, they're allowed to bury illegal waste, except out-of-town waste, and pollute the stream. And OBRA's last point in the submission addressed the section on targets in the strategy. We want much better information about volumes and types of waste than what we have now, and the Council should gather, monitor and analyse the waste data in the most stringent way. Otherwise, you can't have a meaningful plan. We want to see a timeline for the zero waste strategy with tracking and progress indicators. And hopefully this will be in the WMMP action plan. The Southern Landfill is a facility that should be included in the timeline. As waste is reduced to a minimum, there's good reason to keep the landfill open only for emergency resilience purposes and possibly hazardous waste like asbestos, and send all other residual amounts to a regional facility, with very small amounts, hopefully. And a timeline would show the city working towards this goal and showing us how. And finally, we're asking you to bear in mind when talking about zero waste, that zero waste means zero landfills. Thanks very much.
Any questions? Iona.
Do you have a potential site for a regional landfill?
No, we don't. So we would like to see that as part of the investigations and plans.
And obviously not near in a residential suburb.
No, it's totally unsuitable now as a regional centre.
Okay, but obviously we want to not have many landfills.
No.
Thank you. Thanks. Sue Coots from Zero Waste Network Aotearoa. Online.
Kia ora koutou. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I'm Sue Coots, as I said, from Zero Waste Network, which is a nationwide network of community-led service providers, so does resource recovery and community engagement, behaviour change work in the main. We have a number of members here in Wellington, and so we've put in a submission in support of the strategy for that reason. I would like to acknowledge the hard work that's gone into establishing the strategy. We know that big change of direction, and so the team has really worked hard to get that all together. We fully support the use of zero waste strategies and circular economy principles that underpin this new direction of travel. And we're really happy to see how well it aligns with key strategic documents that Wellington City Council has in its portfolio already. That's things like long-term plan with the idea of accelerating the waste-free zero carbon transition, and Te Asakura and the economic wellbeing strategy. One of the things that we know is that when we reduce waste, we reduce emissions as well up the supply chain, and so it's a critical strategy to put in place when you're trying to reduce emissions for Wellington City and be first to zero. So really happy to see that you have the Zero Waste program in place as well, which embeds the strategy into council decision making and resource allocation decisions inside the mechanics of council. I think that was one of the weaknesses in the past, that there wasn't really a strong line to that higher level leadership team, and we're really happy to see that there's a delivery mechanism there as well. We see this Zero Waste strategy as a cornerstone, a real cornerstone document that enables you to deliver on community outcomes across all 4 well-beings, and we'll put some detail on this in our submission. We've made quite a few suggestions, you may have seen already, and some recommendations in there that we think really strengthen the document, but I'm just going to highlight a few points today. We see the Zero Waste strategy as a critical tool for you as a council and also for you as councillors. So you have there's 3 critical jobs that you've got in the next few years. One is the advocacy of central government, so that you're getting the support you need from central government to be able to put things in place, especially around the economic levers and economic drivers through product stewardship and those types of regulation. We really think that it's a useful guide for you as councillors around the table when you're thinking about decision making around resource allocation and priorities. You can come back to this document and go, what are we really trying to achieve here? And you can use it as a base for your thinking. And we think it's a really important document for creating a new identity for Wellington City. So it really locks in and cements that idea that Wellington City is just what we do around here. We're zero waste, we're zero carbon. That's how every business, every household, every piece of government operates here. And just to totally normalise that over the coming years. A second thing that I really support is the intention to work with others who have shared goals. We see that ecosystem approach being really valuable. It's great seeing the integration of Tupiki Ora into the document, and the intent to continue working to develop the relationship with mana whenua, and would really encourage you to think about that being something which is around economic opportunities for mana whenua, as well as thinking about consultation and integrating Tawa Māori. Really pleased to see the intent to engage with and to empower community. Those big industrial scale operations are valuable and they're useful, but they're only one piece of the puzzle. If you want to bring zero waste to life and at the community scale, then you really need to have those smaller scale local community facing facilities that can engage people and bring them on board and give them opportunities to participate. So we know that behaviour change is a bit of a tough ask, shifting to a different culture or a different identity for the city around zero waste, zero carbon is a massive job. And it's really important that that behaviour change dimension is integrated into practical service delivery, so it doesn't just become a top-down, information giving activity. I guess that's about all I'll say. Happy to answer some questions, but my last thing to say would be that the waste strategy puts you in a really strong position going into the development of the WMMP in the next few months. So well done on getting ahead of the game. Also really well done with the central government strategy. So yeah, it's awesome to see Wellington in such a great position.
Thank you, Sue. I had an interesting conversation with the Packaging Forum on Monday where they were arguing for product stewardship for all products, not, just taking some to start off with, the way I understood it. And I was just wanting to get your response on that, what you thought about that.
Well, I think that for council, the critical dimension is the rates budget. I guess every council at the moment is going through that painful process of the escalating rates budget and having to justify the line items that you've got in there. If we want to get traction with circular economy and with better recycling, better recovery, better reuse, durability and all that stuff, then product stewardship is the tool. That's the number one tool. And having some sort of advanced disposal fee or economic instruments that take the cost pressure off councils and put it on to producers and consumers is that's the obvious step that we need to take. Takes the heat off you guys having to justify everything. It doesn't mean that you don't have to be involved in helping to implement the systems and get the processes in place, but it could mean that, I guess the best example I can think of at the moment is container return scheme. At the moment, all of the recycling of beverage containers that you guys do through Wellington City Council rates budget is, it's a cost to you. It has to pass through that decision-making process. If we had container return scheme, that would be gone. It would be sitting with producer and the consumer, and you guys might still be facilitating the systems on the ground to get the things happening and playing that coordination role, but you wouldn't have to fund it. And so I think that looking for new economic instruments and new ways of funding these things is, on everyone's top of everyone's list at the moment. And so I think that's really important. So I'd agree with them on that.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions if we've got time, but probably the first one, Sue, is I know that you've worked closely alongside the community resource recovery centres that popped up in Auckland post or around COVID. Do you know how, I guess, financially self-supporting they are? Like, have they needed more intervention, or are they financially balanced?
Well, I think it's really linked to the issues around recycling. That everywhere you go, recycling needs some sort of input from somebody to pay the cost. It costs money to recycle. You can't do it for free. And so, as I understand it, the sites in Auckland all need some support to cover the cost of the recycling dimension of what's happening on their at their facilities or their drop-off sites. But if container return scheme came in and a few of the other product stewardship schemes, especially around e-waste and some of those other high churn items came on stream, then that would really change the economics of those operations. And I think speaking to the the floods and the emergency response, we saw a lot of those places kicked into gear in the same way that some of the marae and other community facilities did, to gather, a lot of the Auckland sites were places to gather materials and goods and things that people would need who had to move out of their house or lost all their possessions, and being a facilitation, a place to facilitate the transfer of things where one household had too many blankets, one household had none. So, I think that they, going back to that point about how they can be useful in more than one way, those local facilities are really useful in that resilience type space as well.
Right, thank you. And then one more, in your submission you talk about a new section on the funding and financing, and that is a very vital part of the strategy going forward. Are you aware of other council models that we could look to for some guidance in that?
Well, I guess there's lots of councils trying different strategies. You see some councils choose not to provide services and you go direct to user pays model. Other councils will build the user pays model into their own services. But I think the most useful thing that you can do is band together with the other councils and really work on getting some clear direction of travel from central government around the product stewardship activities, because we've seen already, say with container return scheme, there was quite a lot of interest in getting it up. As soon as we heard that it was going to be deferred for a little while, then we hear about people not investing, not feeling confident to go ahead with certain things that they had in their plans. And I feel as though all councils are struggling with the rates budget dimension, that they're having to go to the out to the ratepayers to secure the willingness to pay for the next round of spending on these types of things. And I really think that by working together in a collaborative way, you can share knowledge and understanding, and you can also use your collective lobbying power to try to push some of these things through that are going to really help at your level. And I'd probably point to Auckland as one of the most useful places to go for, thinking on this, because they've been thinking about it quite hard for quite a long time. Got a big team up there.
Kia ora, thanks, Sue.
Yes, as you point out, it costs money to recycle, and that there's a lot of cost pressure on the councils for rates. What would you say to businesses though, in terms of passing the cost to them through some sort of requires stewardship such as a container return scheme, what do you say to businesses who say, well, look, we're struggling, we can't afford to have more cost increases? And also, can you comment about Wellington City sort of trying to do this alone, or really needing to do this as a cooperative exercise, either regionally or with government?
Well, I see if we go to the business example, then I think that the social license to operate is running out for some business models. If a significant proportion of your bottom line is affected by the type of packaging that you're using, or the amount of waste you're creating, or the amount of emissions you're creating, then you really need to think about whether your business model is a suitable one for the next 100 years. I guess that some of the business models that we have seen being used in the past are no longer fit for purpose. And that's one of in the same way that we've got managed retreat from parts of the landscape because of, flooding and other things, we're going to see managed retreat from some sort of business model. So I would say that, looking for ways to support businesses to shift to new models, to take shift cost out of their system might be a good approach, but I think that everyone has to accept the reality that in the new operating environment, in the circular economy, you're going to be having to pay your way if you're choosing to behave in a wasteful way. And polluter pays and producer pays has been coming for a long time. And I think people need to just accept that that's a reality. In terms of what's the job of Wellington City and what's the job of, that sort of collective or collaborative approach, I guess one of the great reliefs that all of us had last week was the waste, central government's waste strategy has finally appeared, and that gives us all a lot of direction now about how things are going to flow, be able to work in similar directions, be able to understand what central government's going to bring to the table and what others are going to bring. One of the good things that Wellington City has highlighted in its strategy is that intention to work in an ecosystem, not to work alone. And I think that that's also something that's coming through really strongly in the government's waste strategy, where they've kind of gone, well, we all have roles to play, they're not the same. And there's a bit of a table in there outlining what different responsibilities and roles each party has.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. That's great. Hope you got the full answer there, Tony. And now we'll go on to our last submitter, which is Spencer Clubb from the Wellington City Council Environmental Reference Group. Thank you, Spencer.
Kia ora koutou, ko Spencer Clubb, aho. Thank you for waiting this long. I'm lucky last on behalf of the Environmental Reference Group. So I guess the reference group is a strong supporter of the overall strategy. The aims and ambitions, we're really delighted to see it. And we strongly support the 4 objectives and the priority work streams. So most of our submission that is more detailed is around how to make the strategy, I guess, a better guiding document so that the ambition, the goals and the objectives can come to light and do their job as a strategy document. So first of all, presentationally, we did feel, even as somewhat experts in policy and some of us in waste, that there could be benefits in improving the flow, making a better connection throughout the document, particularly how the actions contribute to the targets. So some idea of a theory of change or an intervention logic that really steps through the ambition, the objectives, the actions, and then the targets would be fantastic to see. And that would really help guide people's understanding of what is in there and why it's in there. The second area we'd like to touch on is the priority actions themselves. Sometimes it's a little difficult to tell exactly what's being recommended as an action, and they have to be crystal clear if they're to hold the strategy together and create the change. So we did feel that sometimes it was difficult to know exactly what was being proposed, and therefore whether or not there were some gaps that would eventuate either intentionally or unintentionally when it came to implementing the strategy. I must say that the gaps were foreshadowed in the sense that the topics were often covered in the strategy. The first half of the strategy contained a lot of fantastic information, a lot of ideas, a lot of thought, and some really great analysis. But it was difficult to see some of that content appearing in the priority actions. So I do want to draw your attention to a few of those, and also highlight a couple of areas that maybe we would have expected to see but didn't. So first of all, beefing up the compliance function of the council. We felt that was really important, came through strongly, the rationale for that, but it seemed to be a bit missing in the priority actions. Similarly, for making greater use of council bylaws, either in setting new ones or in enforcing existing ones, and of course enforcing any new ones. Thirdly, a clear commitment to building an organic processing facility. The kind of case for it is made really well, but we didn't see it really spelled out as a priority action in the second half of the document. And similarly, the commitment to either building or supporting a construction waste facility. So like I say, it might be that the intent was to be really clear about some of these priorities, and I know that they are, they take up a lot of thought and they're really been kind of considered well, but we would like to see it a bit clearer as an action that we can kind of, I guess, hold the council to account to deliver or support the delivery of. And finally, another example would be research into alternative uses for organic waste. Really essential component, really well and clearly spelled out, but we didn't see it coming through as clearly as an actual priority. So a couple of areas that maybe we didn't see in the actions or would like to see strengthened. One of those is around business-to-business support, particularly for the circular economy. So we do see a lot of need to support circular infrastructure and circular solutions that bridge the gap between different sectors, whether it's sometimes the waste streams have to go to another sector to be used as a resource. And we think the council's got a really strong role in supporting and facilitating that, providing a place for some collective conversations and potentially some financial support if it's appropriate. And the second area would be always considering more of a design approach and a user-centric approach to drive the behaviour change. A lot of the ideas that came through in our discussions were based on our experiences as end users or as business owners or business users, and thinking about the end user and even potentially showing in the strategy how the end user is affected and how the actions will change the experience and therefore the incentives to create that, to maximise the benefits of what the council's doing to get down to zero waste. So if I may, I'd like to liken our submission to a film, or liken the strategy to a film. It's got a great plot line, zero waste, circular economy. It's got a great cast. We've got sludge, we've got organics, construction waste, we've got household waste. And the trailer is amazing. There's heaps of actions, there's goodies, there's baddies, there's a lot of exciting sequences, and we're thrilled at the ending that the targets are suggesting might happen. The first half, the trailer really nails it. But we watched the film and we're just a little bit disappointed. The plot does jump around quite a lot. The dialogue is sometimes a bit muffled and unclear. Sometimes in the scenes, we're not quite sure what just happened. And it is a little bit long. So at the end, you're sure there were some sequences in the trailer that were missed in the actual film. Like, where was that? So we'd like to recommend that the film is remade, and if you do that carefully, based on all of the key components, then it's guaranteed to be a blockbuster. Thank you.
How much work do you think it is to rewrite that as professional policy people?
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean,
okay, so I've got a C kind of, or a C plus.
Like, you know,
needs to get to an A.
I guess we could, if you gave a skilled policy writer a week, they would make some significant improvements to it.
Okay.
But that, of course, won't address the priorities. There'd need to be some other checking as to whether
inputs.
They were authorised or not. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, that's it in terms of the public participation and the submission. So now we move on to listening to Siobhan, who is going to introduce the report.
Thank Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, being the star here. So this is a report that I'm pleased to present and ask that the committee receive the information and hear the oral submitters and thank them for their submissions.
Does anybody have any questions? Iona, I just knew you would put your hand up.
Siobhan, look, these were really, really, really good submissions, and I'm just wondering if there's some reflection there about having, for this kind of process, it would have been good to have some roundtable discussions, like for a couple of hours, just to be able to exchange ideas, get more questions, rather than just having a little slot. So I was just wondering if you've...
Oh, absolutely, we can consider that for future, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Siobhan, actually, I have a question for you. And then Sarah's turn. My question is, next time we have one of these, could we get all of the submissions, not just the ones of the people who are making the verbal? Because for people who are not particularly versed in these topics, I mean, it's good that we got the submissions today, and obviously we learned, I think some of us anyhow learned a lot from what we heard. But it would have been interesting to have known how many submissions there were in total, and also if there were any alternative opinions, because there was a high level of consistency and a perspective, if you like, from the people we see. So I think next time, for the next one of these panel meetings, it would be great to actually get all of the written submissions before the meeting.
Yeah, what our general process tends to be is we gather all the submissions, we do an engagement report which actually lists them out in themes. So yeah, we can have a look at our timeframes to see if it was possible to do that before we have the oral submissions for future.
Yeah, because I mean, even if we don't get your report on the submissions, even if we had the submission, I mean, it's just, I mean, it was great that having all the submissions. It was great having the people appear to talk to us. But I think for some of us who are not so knowledgeable about these areas, it would have been more interesting and more informative to have had a wider range, if you like.
Okay.
Anyone else got any other? Oh, sorry, Sarah.
So my question was really, we did hear quite a few suggestions, as to how the report could be improved, or even a bit of data collection done to roadmap what's happening in the city. Is there any way officers are in a position to take some of those suggestions on board?
Yeah, that's
the point of this. Okay,
we will take that on board. I think I would probably respond to Spencer here. There's a lot of that, the things that we don't know are going to be discovered through a business casing process. So we don't know what the organics facility or what sort of form that's going to be taking. Same with the resource recovery. We need to be able to do the analysis and the work to be able to justify that, to bring it back to you for a decision. So if we think about the strategy as the high-level roadmap of where we want to go and how we think we're going to get there, we don't know the specifics of how we're going to get there yet. That's the next phase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If that's all the debate, is there a mover for the motion? Oh, okay, sorry, okay. Was it? Oh, I see, goodness. Was there a difference? Oh, okay, right, okay. Okay, is there a mover for the motion? Oh, me, okay. I'm happy to do that. Is there a seconder? Laurie? Is there any... Oh, you can't. Rebecca, thank you. Can we cut them out of the debate because they have done all the talking? Anybody, any debate? Oh, well, we'll let you have this as your last chance, right? Okay.
I just really want to emphasise how much we appreciate the time and the effort that our community has brought with their collective intelligence today. I think we can all agree over our journey to this point that we've had a really fulsome community helping and guiding us along the way, including our residents who live around our taonga landfill, and also the many businesses and innovations and NGOs that are helping us. So I just really want to emphasise that it's we're gratefully are thanking you for your time and energy on helping our journey to become a world-leading zero-waste capital. So kia ora.
Thank you, Laurie. Sarah.
Just briefly to say that I was actually very impressed by the breadth of submitters. So there's a lot going on in this space, and I think probably because we are hearing, very positive feedback to this initiative, and I know the chair has raised, whether there's other feedback out there, but I think most people would agree, in fact, that this is a very important piece of work for any city to be doing, to be trying to have a goal to move to zero waste. We can always try to achieve that. For me, a lot of things have come out. So the need to actually do some mapping, what's happening in the city right now. There's a lot happening in this space. The idea that it's good to have a distributed network, not necessarily all centralised. The idea that we certainly need to look for funding, ways of funding this, that are beyond council. The partnership aspects, the engaging of the community, and also the reputational bonus that we can have from doing this well. So there's certainly been a lot of really valuable points that have been made, and very good to hear from our officers that this is, still time to take on board a lot of this. So good.
Thank you. That's all. Would you like to vote on the motion? Great, that's passed, thank you. And now we'd just like to stand and give a karakia for the end of the meeting. Thank you. I'd like to stand. Good to hear.